Right. Okay. So first question is, where did the idea of covering a girl's disappearance from the point of view of her reconstruction standing come from?
Well, I think that probably came down to some research on IMDb. No, not IMDb, on Google. I'll start again. Yeah, we were actually doing research into how crime scene reconstructions are staged. And Crime Watch UK have a great website, and they give a lot of the backstory of how they set about setting up one of their reconstructions. And I began to follow links on Google and found a link to a theatre company, a drama, like an amateur dramatics company in Liverpool, who promotes their company by laying claim to having appeared in the Crime Watch UK reconstruction. So the interesting thing is that the reconstruction that they were involved in was for a really horrific case, absolutely awful. And yeah, you know, they were really proud, they had lots of pictures from the shoes, and they're really excited that they've been on TV. And I think that started the germ of an idea, because we were concentrating a lot on the reconstruction and the police officer, and maybe at the time also concentrating on the character of Joy who went missing. And then we began to think about the idea of being plucked from obscurity to play the part of somebody just because you might resemble them or vaguely look like them. And we just became more and more interested in who would that girl be. And that element of the story took over so much that the way we wanted to drop the character of Joy as early as possible and concentrate on Helen. So the Joy element kind of sets us up in the film, and then hopefully at some point the audience, you know, can turn that corner with the film and, you know, concentrating on Helen.
And the second question is, like, obviously Helen has a very unique kind of highly mannered, emotional, distant where did that come from?
Well, some of the aesthetic considerations, I guess this often happens, that some of the aesthetic considerations are based out of practical ones in some ways. So, for example, quite a number of the cast, you know, they've never acted before, so clearly we're not going to ask them to, you know, turn up the dial and the emotions, you know, because there's no technique there to kind of hit the high registers of emotional kind of outpourings. So that's on the first level. So we kind of have to keep it in a fairly low gear, just on that practical level. And the main driving quality of that, though, is less to do with the practicalities, but more to do with the aesthetic desires that we don't really like films that try to manipulate you evidently as it's going along. So you feel it sometimes, you feel the story beats, you feel a certain predictability. Now they're very solid films, they're the kind of the general films that are out there. And partly we expect to see them, and we expect the story to be dished up in a certain way, in the same way that we want the pizza to be dished up in a specific way as well. We didn't want to obviously go down that line, and nor did we have any commercial pressure on us to go down that line. So we're kind of freed up and liberated a little bit to play into some of our strengths, but also to play the film in the way that we like our cinema to be. The films that we like to make, but also the films that we like to see, where we have very low-key performances. And I'm not just talking about contemporary films. I'm going, you know, back to Bresson, for example, where again you work with people who've never performed before, but you play it down low. Even if they are very skilled, you still want the performers to turn the dial down on the emotional, on the acting in a way, because they don't. I don't know. We just didn't want it to be very obvious in terms of its emotional concern. So there was one or two more skilled performers, and they found the rhythms very difficult. You know, so they might say, well, I normally work with an actor and I work the rhythm off them, and we say, well, we would rather you work the rhythm off the landscape around you, and don't think about it in how you normally approach a character in film. So it's working in a counterintuitive way to the normal way. But when you slow things down, or you deliberately ask people not to respond in a naturalistic way and work on things in a more theatrical way. Actually, it's quite a theatrical film, a staged way of doing things. You get a very different kind of quality coming through, and that's just making very modest shifts. So if I talk and you don't respond in the normal rhythm of things, but just wait an extra couple of seconds, you get a very different emotional tone. And of course the acting then has to be much more attenuated. So I think that is a very dominant feeling in the film, but it's not accidental. It's quite a, I mean, I think it's pretty clear it's not accidental.
But do you feel that there's this kind of pressure in like modern British society in particular to keep like grief private and carry on with like normality in the face of like tragedy?
Well, no, I think there's much more pressure to not keep it private, but just to get it out there. I mean, with the Madeleine McCann, well, the Lady Di thing, the Madeleine McCann thing, there was a lot of national upset that she wasn't outpouring enough. You know, there was no way that it's the exact opposite of what you're saying. I think we're watching things like in Big Brother, you know, reality is we want the mess out there. We don't want it suppressed.
Like, reacting all the time, isn't it? There's a real pressure to react and to show that you
like out with the media. Don't you feel there's this really kind of like it's just like get on with things? I don't know, maybe in just like if there's like a public figure, it's kind of like acceptable to like outpour like grief. Everyone can be sad about it, but if it's just like a normal person, like if people have like professional lives around like this person who dies, they're just kind of expected to carry on with normality. Don't you feel that's kind of at all like relevant?
I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, like a friend of ours, you know, on a kind of like a personal level, you know, we were talking to somebody there recently about death of a father, and you know, they were talking about the mother-in-law and how uncomfortable their reaction to death was. And I suppose the question comes back, like, well, what do you expect from people to respond? So, for example, in that scene you're talking about, we specifically told them never to look at each other. So she doesn't actually look at him. She looks at the girl across the way, but she never reacts. She keeps concentrated, she keeps it calm. And you do hear about those situations where a couple have lost a child or something tragic has happened, and the internal mechanisms of a relationship begin to break down. They blame each other, like the Stephen Lawrence, his mother and father, although they kept together for quite a while to kind of seek justice, eventually the marriage, it'd be very hard to keep a marriage going. So I kind of feel people have their own way of doing it. Normality, death is very simple at the end of the day. You have to get on with your daily life. You can't be so ground down. You've got to eat. You've got to get out of bed. You've got to wash. But I do think you can often walk around somewhat in a day as emotionally shocked and somewhat traumatized. And I can easily imagine if somebody lost their child, the daily functions would have to go on. But I would say I can also imagine that somehow you would be in a somewhat of a, you know, somnambulistic state somehow, that emotionally you might, your antennae may be somewhat disrupted. So I think it's fairly acceptable that the parents are, in a way, it's okay that they are somewhat numbed, you know, numbed acting, their responses are numbed. Helen, in a way, is also somewhat emotionally shut down. She spent a life of not being loved, not learning the skills of loving people, and is not really trusting of people around her. So I think that also is very evident in the film.
Yeah, like, was there any kind of significance in choosing the colour yellow for the jacket, or I don't know? It just...
I was thinking the other day that if we chose any other colour, like purple, we didn't always intend to film in the autumn. That happened because of, you know, logistical reasons. We actually were going to shoot at the end of the summer, but then we pushed it into the autumn. And then the yellow jacket seemed like the perfect choice because, and it wasn't until we were on location that we realised that it worked. But we wanted her to stand out, so you kind of think of the colours that you could go for. And we wanted the jacket to become like it's not explained how she ends up with the jacket. There's a lot of ambiguity around certain things, and the way I think that's unimportant. She just has this jacket, and it becomes this powerful kind of image through the film, and it also makes her And that crossover between Helen and Joy, this kind of ambiguous crossover between the two characters, that maybe you could have a reading of the film that they're one and the same person, and the jacket kind of, I think, underscores that.